Most people calculate their salary. Almost nobody calculates the full cost of a job that drains them. When you sign an employment contract, the only number printed on the page is your gross income. If that number says $80,000, human psychology anchors to $80,000. But from a strict financial literacy perspective, an $80,000 salary is a gross illusion. It is a top-line revenue figure for the business of You Inc. It does not account for the operating expenses, the depreciation of your sanity, localized inflation, and the opportunity costs required to actually generate that revenue. When you work a job you hate, a job that actively drains your cognitive load and emotional bandwidth, the operating expenses of your life skyrocket. To maintain that baseline revenue, you begin hemorrhaging capital across 4 distinct balance sheet categories: commute time, stress health costs, opportunity costs, and lost side income potential. Today, we are stripping away the emotional complaints. I am not measuring your happiness. I am measuring your cash. By applying rigorous financial modeling, we are going to quantify the exact dollar amount that a miserable job extracts from your net worth. It is time to find out if you are actually making money or if your job is just a very expensive hobby. I have spent years looking at balance sheets, and the biggest leak I see is not in subscriptions or coffee. It is in the hidden costs of a bad 9-to-5. Before we dive into the math that will likely change how you view your paycheck, I want to invite you to do something that offers a massive return on your time. If you value seeing through the marketing of the modern economy and want to actually optimize your capital, hit that subscribe button. It is the best ROI you will get today. I am Tom, and we are going to run the numbers that your HR department would rather you ignored. We are looking at this like a business transaction. If you were a CEO and a client cost you more in resources than they paid in fees, you would fire them. Yet, millions of people keep a client called their job that is effectively bankrupting them. We are starting with the most obvious drain, the one we all feel in our lower backs every morning, the commute. But we are going to calculate it in a way you have never considered before. The commute is the most easily identifiable financial drain of a job. Yet, most workers drastically undercalculate its true cost. Usually, people look at the price of gas and stop their math. They think, okay, it costs me $50 a week to get to the office. From a financial literacy standpoint, that is like saying a car only costs what you pay for the windshield wipers. To find the real number, we have to use the IRS and AAA true cost of vehicle ownership. This includes depreciation, maintenance, and insurance. A job you hate rarely offers the flexibility of remote work. It demands face time. It demands that you sit in a metal box on a highway during the least efficient hours of the day. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average American commutes about 41 miles per day round trip. The American Automobile Association calculates the true cost of driving, including all those hidden factors like tires and the loss of the car's resale value, at approximately 72 cents per mile for a standard sedan. If you do the multiplication for 244 working days, you are looking at $7,200 a year. That is $7,000 of your $80,000 salary gone before you even walk through the front door. And that is just the hard cost of the machine. Now let us look at the time value of money. Your time has a mathematically quantifiable market rate. If your baseline salary is $80,000, assuming a standard 2,080-hour work year, your baseline market rate is $38.46 per hour. When you work a job you hate, the commute is not leisure time. It is not a fun podcast session. It is uncompensated labor required to perform the compensated labor. The average round-trip commute is roughly an hour, but toxic jobs often require face time during peak rush hour, pushing that to 90 minutes of stop-and-go traffic. That is 1.5 hours of uncompensated labor per day. If we multiply those 90 minutes by your $38 hourly rate, that is $57 per day in lost time. Over a standard working year, that equates to over $14,000 in uncompensated labor. When you add the $7,000 in vehicle costs to the $14,000 in lost time, the total economic bleed of commuting to a job you hate is over $21,000 per year. You are essentially paying $21,000 for the privilege of sitting in traffic to get to a place that makes you miserable. In personal finance, a dollar spent is not just a dollar lost. It is the loss of what that dollar could have earned if invested in the market. This is the opportunity cost of capital. If we take just the hard cost of your commute, that's $7,200, and assume those funds were instead invested in an S&P 500 index fund, yielding a historical average return of 8%, the numbers become terrifying. Over 10 years, your actual contributions would be $72,000. But the lost compound interest is over $32,000. Your total 10-year commute wealth deficit is over $104,000. You are driving a $100,000 hole into your net worth every decade. This is why people feel like they are working hard but never getting ahead. They are literally burning their future wealth on the asphalt. The psychology here is fascinating. We justify it because everyone does it. But everyone is also living paycheck to paycheck. We accept the commute as a fixed cost of life, but it is actually a variable cost of your specific employment choice. You are choosing to subsidize your employer's office space with your own vehicle and your own retirement fund. The protocol here is not just to find a closer job, though that helps. The goal is to recapture that $21,000 of annual economic bleed. If you can transition to a remote role, even one that pays $10,000 less in gross salary, you are actually coming out ahead by $11,000 in net economic value. You have to look at the net hourly wage rather than the gross annual salary. To fix this, you need to audit your transit. If you cannot go remote, can you move closer? If moving is too expensive, can you negotiate a 4-day workweek? Cutting just 1 day of commuting per week saves you $4,000 a year in economic value. That is a 5% raise you can give yourself without asking your boss for a dime. Start viewing your commute not as a time for audiobooks, but as an invoice you are paying to your employer. When the invoice gets too high, it is time to find a new client. But as bad as the commute is, it is nothing compared to the hidden tax your body starts to pay when the Sunday scaries become a permanent mental state. If you think the gas and the lost time are bad, wait until you see what happens to your medical liabilities. Workplace stress is not just a biological phenomenon. It is a highly expensive line item on your personal income statement. A toxic job drains your executive functioning, leaving you in a state of decision fatigue that forces you to outsource your basic survival needs to premium-priced convenient services. It is what I call the coping tax. We are about to look at the direct medical costs and the lifestyle inflation that a hated job triggers. Most people think they are treating themselves after a hard day, but in reality, they are just paying a premium to keep their engines from exploding. We are going to quantify the takeout, the stimulants, the therapy, and the retail therapy. By the time we are done with this next section, you might realize that a quarter of your paycheck is just going toward keeping you functional enough to earn the next one. This is the biological reality of the grind. Harvard and Stanford have estimated that workplace stress costs the US economy up to $190 billion in healthcare costs annually. But let us look at your individual share. When a job is toxic, you don't just feel bad, your body starts to break. This manifests as insomnia, hypertension, and gastrointestinal issues. If a toxic job forces you into therapy, the average out-of-pocket cost in the US is about $150 a session. Twice a month, and you are looking at $3,600 a year. Then there are the prescriptions: sleep aids to shut your brain off, blood pressure meds to keep your heart from pounding during that 3 p.m. meeting, and antacids to deal with the stress-induced knots in your stomach. Copays for specialists and these medications can easily hit $100 a month. That is another $1,200 a year. Your direct medical tax for working a job you hate is roughly $4,800. On paper, you have health insurance. In reality, you are using that insurance to treat symptoms caused by the very place providing the insurance. It is a closed loop of financial and physical depletion. We tell ourselves it is just part of the grind, but your bank account and your arteries beg to differ. This is capital being diverted from your savings into the pharmaceutical and therapeutic industries just to maintain a baseline of existence. Then we have the coping tax, also known as the convenience premium. When you hate your job, your cognitive battery is at 0% by 5:30 p.m. You literally lose the energy to perform cost-saving domestic labor. A home-cooked meal might cost $4, but a dinner ordered via an app averages $25 once you add the fees and the tips. If exhaustion forces you to order takeout just 3 extra times a week, that is a $60 weekly deficit. Over a year, that is $3,100 spent just because you were too tired to boil water. Then look at the stimulant and depressant tax. You need the $6 latte to spike your cortisol in the morning, and the $20 bottle of wine or craft beer to depress your anxiety at night. If that is your daily or semi-weekly ritual, you are burning another $3,000 a year. We add in the domestic outsourcing tax, paying for grocery delivery because you can't face the aisles, or a house cleaner because your weekends are spent in a recovery coma, and you are looking at another $1,500. When you add therapy, meds, takeout, stimulants, and outsourcing, the annual out-of-pocket cost of coping with a job you hate is over $14,000. To have $14,000 in net spending power, an employee in the 24% tax bracket actually has to earn over $20,000 in gross income. A quarter of your $80,000 salary is gone just to keep you functional. There is a psychological phenomenon where emotional distress triggers dopamine-seeking purchasing behavior. We call it retail therapy, but it is actually a wealth destruction mechanism. The average American spends nearly $200 a month on impulse purchases to treat themselves for surviving a bad week. That is $2,400 a year in depreciating consumer goods that you probably didn't even want. Then there are the aspirational subscriptions. You pay $80 a month for a gym membership because you want to be healthy, but you are too exhausted to ever go. That is nearly $1,000 a year set on fire. The irony is that the more we hate the job, the more we spend to escape it in small, fleeting increments. We buy the new gadget or the expensive shoes because they provide a momentary spike of joy in an otherwise grey week. But that joy is a high-interest loan against your future. You are trading your long-term freedom for a short-term hit of dopamine. When you are in a job you love, or at least one that doesn't drain you, your need for these external treats drops significantly. You don't need to buy a new life every Saturday because you don't hate your life on Tuesday. The hidden cost of misery is the constant need to compensate for it with your credit card. If you're listening to these numbers and realizing your own balance sheet is a bit of a mess, don't worry. Most people never see this because they don't have the tools to track it. If you want to stop guessing and start managing your life like a high-performance business, you should check out the digital tools I have built for exactly this purpose. In the description, you will find the ultimate personal finance dashboard and my monthly budget planner. These are the exact spreadsheets and mathematical systems I use to track my own true net hourly wage and stop the leaks. They take the guesswork out of your financial life, so you can see exactly where your coping tax is going. Using a system like this is the difference between flying blind and having a flight path to freedom. It is the best way to execute the strategy we are talking about today. Click the link, grab the dashboard, and let us get back to the most invisible wealth destroyer of them all, the opportunity cost. Because while the money you spend is bad, the money you never get to make is much, much worse. In finance, the greatest losses are often not the checks you write, but the checks you fail to cash. A draining job consumes your psychological bandwidth, leading to what I call career paralysis. You stay in a hated role simply because the thought of updating a resume and enduring an interview process feels insurmountable. This paralysis triggers the loyalty penalty. Forbes and various compensation reports have quantified this, showing that employees who stay at a company for more than 2 years typically receive annual merit increases of roughly 3%. In contrast, those who change companies realize an average salary increase of 10 to 20%. Let us run the math for an $80,000 earner. If you are paralyzed by exhaustion and take that 3% raise for 5 years, you will earn a total of $424,000. But if you had the energy to job hop every 2.5 years for a 15% bump, you would have earned $455,000. The immediate 5-year opportunity cost of staying in that draining job is over $30,000 in lost gross wages. You are literally paying your employer $30,000 for the privilege of staying comfortable in your misery. We call it security, but it is actually the most expensive insurance policy on earth. You are insuring yourself against a better life by paying a massive tax on your own potential. Then we have the inflation bleed. When your stagnant job gives you a 3% raise, but the consumer price index rises by 5%, you aren't just staying still. You are taking an effective mathematical pay cut. If inflation runs at 5%, your $80,000 salary loses $4,000 of purchasing power. Your $2,400 pre-tax raise leaves you with a net deficit of $1,600 in purchasing power per year. You are essentially paying your employer for the privilege of working there. This is why high-stress, low-growth jobs are a double-edged sword. They take all your energy, which prevents you from finding a better deal, and then they slowly inflate away the value of the little money they actually give you. It is a slow-motion wealth collapse. Most people don't notice it because their bank account number is technically going up, but the amount of groceries that money buys is going down faster. To keep pace, you have to be aggressive. But aggression requires energy, and the job is designed to leave you with none. It is a perfect trap. The employer gets a high-performing asset that is too tired to realize it is being undervalued. This is why engagement and energy are your 2 most valuable currencies, and you are letting a bad boss spend them for you. The real tragedy of opportunity cost is that it compounds. That $30,000 difference in wages over 5 years isn't just $30,000. It is money that could have been funneled into a retirement account. If we take the wage delta from just 1 year, say $10,000, and invest it into the market at an 8% return for 20 years, that single year's lost wage costs you nearly $50,000 at retirement. Multiply that by a decade of career stagnation, and a toxic job can easily cost you between $250,000 and $500,000 in lost lifetime wealth. This is the difference between retiring at 55 and working until 70. When you choose to stay in a job you hate because it feels safe, you are actually making one of the riskiest financial bets possible. You are betting that your future self won't mind working an extra 15 years to pay for your current self's fear. The psychology of loss aversion makes us fear losing our current paycheck. But we should be much more afraid of losing the $500,000 our future self is entitled to. We prioritize the known salary today and completely ignore the unknown fortune we are sacrificing. A hated job isn't just making your Monday bad, it is potentially ruining your 70s. That is a price no paycheck can cover. The protocol for fixing career paralysis is to realize that your current job is just one client in a massive marketplace. To overcome the energy deficit, you have to treat job searching as a non-negotiable operating expense. Even if you are exhausted, spend 30 minutes on a Tuesday morning, when your brain is freshest, updating your assets. Not your resume, your assets. What skills have you acquired? What problems have you solved? If you wait until the weekend, you will be too burnt out to do it. You have to steal the energy back from your employer during the week. Use your lunch break to take a call with a recruiter. Use your FaceTime to network. The goal is to reduce the friction of leaving. The more prepared you are, the less energy it takes to jump. Remember, the loyalty penalty is real, but it is voluntary. You only pay it if you stay. By moving every few years, you ensure that you are always being paid the current market rate for your skills, rather than a legacy rate based on who you were 5 years ago. It is a simple calculation. Is the comfort of your current desk worth $500,000? If not, it is time to move. Most people stop here and think they've seen the worst of it. But we haven't even talked about the money you're failing to make after 5 p.m. We are currently in a highly monetized after-hours economy. The barrier to entry for generating side income is mathematically zero. The only capital required is cognitive energy and time. And this is exactly what a job you hate zeroes out. By 5 o'clock, you are a shell of a human. Your employer is effectively eliminating their competition for your labor by making sure you are too tired to work for yourself. We are going to look at the mathematical value of the 5 to 9 and why your exhaustion is costing you an extra $26,000 a year in unrealized revenue. This is where the real wealth is built, in the margins, and a toxic job is erasing those margins before you even get home. Let us assign a conservative dollar value to the time outside of work. If you have a skill set that commands $80,000 a year in a standard job, your freelance or consulting market rate is typically 1.5 to 2 times that amount. This accounts for the fact that you're providing your own benefits and taxes. So your freelance rate is roughly $57 an hour. If your job drains you so severely that you spend your evenings and weekends doom scrolling or sleeping just to recover, you are losing that capacity. If you could allocate just 10 hours a week to a side income stream, we are talking about $576 a week in lost revenue. Over a year, that is nearly $28,000. Even if you take a low-skill gig at $20 an hour, you are still losing nearly $10,000 a year. The myth is that we need rest to be productive at our jobs. The reality is that the job is consuming all of your productive capacity and leaving you with just enough rest to show up again tomorrow. You are a battery that is being fully discharged every day, leaving no power for your own projects. This energy deficit is the ultimate ceiling on your net worth. You are trading your most creative, high-value hours for a fixed salary and giving away your remaining potential for free to the couch and the television. Standard employment income is linear. You trade 1 hour for $1 amount. But side incomes often build equity. If you spend those 10 hours a week building a digital business, a YouTube channel, or a niche blog, you are not just earning an hourly wage, you are creating an asset with a multiple. If a side business eventually generates just $1,000 a month in profit, that asset can often be sold for 30 to 40 times its monthly revenue. That means $1,000 a month in cash flow is actually a $36,000 asset you've built. When you are too tired to build that asset, you aren't just losing the $12,000 a year in profit, you are losing the $40,000 exit value of the business. A toxic job steals your ability to be an owner of capital and keeps you as a pure consumer of income. By draining your energy, your employer successfully ensures that you remain dependent on their paycheck. The dollar cost of this energy deficit is roughly $27,000 a year in unrealized cash flow. Over 5 years, that is over $100,000 in wealth you never created because you were too busy recovering from a job you hate. This is how the middle-class trap works. It gives you enough to survive, but takes enough to ensure you never have the strength to thrive. The psychological trick here is that we view our free time as something we've earned to spend on relaxation. But in the modern economy, free time is actually your seed capital. When you are burnt out, you view your time as a liability to be offloaded. You want to kill time or distract yourself. When you are energized, you view time as an asset to be invested. This is why high performers seem to have more hours in the day. They don't, they just have more energy per hour. A toxic job is essentially a high-interest loan on your energy. It gives you the status of a high-paying role, but charges you 30% interest in the form of mental fatigue. This prevents you from ever reaching the escape velocity of building your own wealth. You stay a tenant of your employer's company rather than the landlord of your own career. The cost of this is not just financial, it is a loss of agency. You lose the ability to say no to things because you haven't built anything of your own to fall back on. The energy deficit makes you a captive audience for your own misery. Breaking this cycle requires a radical shift in how you value your 5 to 9. It is not free time, it is equity time. The protocol for reclaiming this lost potential is to prioritize energy management over time management. If your job is draining you, you have to find ways to automate your work or reduce your emotional investment so you have leftover energy. Treat your job like a utility company. Give them what they need to keep the lights on, but don't give them your entire power grid. Then, take just 1 hour, the first hour after you get home or the hour before you leave, and dedicate it to building an asset. It doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar company. It just has to be something you own. By creating a secondary income stream of even $500 a month, you reduce the financial power your employer has over you. This creates a virtuous cycle. As your side income grows, your stress at your main job decreases because the stakes are lower. When the stakes are lower, you have more energy. When you have more energy, you can build more side income. This is the path to freedom. It starts with realizing that the 2 hours you spend on Netflix to unwind are actually 2 hours of capital you are handing over to a company that doesn't care about your retirement. Take your capital back. To truly practice financial literacy, we have to calculate your true net hourly wage. This is the most honest number in your life. We take your gross income, subtract the taxes, and then subtract every single dollar cost we've discussed. The commute, the coping tax, the inflation bleed, and the medical costs. Then, we divide that by the actual hours dedicated to the job, including the commute and the recovery time. Let us run the model for our $80,000 earner. After taxes, they take home $60,800. But then we subtract the $7,000 in commute costs, the $14,000 in coping taxes, and the $1,600 in lost purchasing power. Their true disposable income is now $37,580. Now, let us look at the hours. 2,080 standard hours, plus 366 hours of commuting, plus 240 hours of unpaid overtime or home emails, plus another 240 hours of recovery time on the weekends. That is nearly 3,000 hours dedicated to the job. When you divide $37,000 by 3,000 hours, you get $12.84 per hour. On paper, you make 80 grand. In reality, you are trading your life for $12.84 an hour. If you live in a state where the minimum wage is $15, your high-status job is mathematically paying you less than a job at the local grocery store that requires zero mental carryover and a 5-minute walk. This math gets even more brutal for high earners, a phenomenon known as the golden handcuffs. Let us look at someone making $200,000 a year. They think they are rich. But high-paying jobs demand aggressive hours and high-visibility commutes. This earner might be working 60 hours a week, plus a 90-minute commute. Their uncompensated time alone can add up to over 1,100 hours a year. Then there's the high earner coping tax, expensive nannies to cover late nights, luxury vacations to escape the burnout, and high-end retail therapy. They might spend $50,000 a year just on outsourcing their life. After taxes and these coping costs, their true disposable income might be $79,000. When you divide that by the 3,100 hours they actually put in, their true net hourly wage is $24.81. That is the equivalent of a $50,000 entry-level job. The golden handcuffs are often made of brass. They stay in the job because they like saying they make 200 grand, but they are living a $24 an hour life. They are working twice as hard for money they don't have time to enjoy, to buy things they only need because they work so hard. It is a carousel of waste. High gross numbers are the ultimate distraction from low net reality. Why do these jobs exist? Because for a time, they look profitable on a corporate balance sheet. But a toxic workplace is a massive macro liability. Gallup estimates that a disengaged employee costs their organisation 17% of their annual salary in lost productivity. For an $80,000 employee, that is $13,000 a year. Then there is the turnover cost. Replacing an employee costs between 33% and 200% of their salary. That is $26,000 to $160,000 out the door. The macro cost to the global economy is nearly $9 trillion. Why does this matter to you? Because it proves the system is inefficient. You are losing $14,000 in coping taxes, and your employer is losing $13,000 in productivity. The toxic job is a net negative transaction for everyone involved. When you realise this, walking away isn't a failure of grit. It is the correction of a broken market. You are leaving a sinking ship that is also trying to set you on fire. Understanding the macro math empowers you to stop feeling guilty about leaving. You aren't betraying a company. You are ending an inefficient B2B partnership that is bankrupting both parties. It is just good business. The final protocol is the FU fund, but it's not a standard emergency fund. You need to calculate it based on your exit burn rate. When you quit a toxic job, your expenses drop. You don't have the commute cost or the takeout tax. If your standard expenses are $4,000, your exit burn rate might only be $2,900. This means you need less money to quit than you think. A 4-month FU fund might only be $11,000. Once you have that, you have the power to walk. You can also consider the downgrade premium. Taking a $15,000 pay cut for a remote, low-stress job can actually double your true net hourly wage. As we saw, our $80,000 earner was making $12 an hour. If they take a $65,000 remote job, their lack of commute and coping costs could bring their true net hourly wage up to $23. They make less gross, but they keep more net, and they gain 800 hours of life back. Use those 800 hours to build that side asset we talked about, and you'll end up making more money with half the stress. That is the ultimate financial optimization. It is not about the top line, it is about what you keep. If you are the kind of person who likes running these numbers and wants to be around others who are optimizing their lives for net value rather than gross status, I want to invite you to join the Optimizers. If you click the join button below, you can become a channel member. You'll get custom sketch badges, but more importantly, you get priority for comment replies. I spend a lot of time in the comments with the members, deep diving into specific financial scenarios and peer reviewing different strategies. It is a small community of people who are tired of the standard financial advice and want to look at the math that actually moves the needle. It is a great way to support the channel and get more direct access to the systems I am building. If you have found value in this deep dive, Joining the membership is the next logical step in your optimization journey. We would love to have you in the inner circle as we continue to tear apart the illusions of the modern economy. True financial literacy requires reframing your career as a business-to-business transaction. You are an independent contractor leasing your life to a client. If a client was costing you $14,000 in operational wear and tear and preventing you from growing, you would fire them today. A job you hate is just a bad client. Stop calculating your salary based on the gross number your employer advertises. Look at your bank account. Track the money flowing out to gas stations and therapists, and find your true net hourly wage. When you put the dollar amounts on paper, the decision to leave is no longer an emotional leap of faith. It is a calculated, strictly necessary financial strategy to save yourself from personal bankruptcy. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever run this math for your own job? What is your coping tax number? Let's treat this as a peer review. Put your numbers down below, anonymously if you have to, and let us see what the real economy looks like. Because the first step to getting out of a trap is realizing you are in one. I am Tom, and I will see you in the comments to help you run those numbers. Remember, your time is the only non-renewable resource you have. Stop selling it for a discount to a client that doesn't deserve you.